can require odor studies, light studies, all that's photometrics plans, all those types of things, and based on the results of that, have mitigation measures such as filtration, such as light screening.
I think that may be our only out for now. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? I'd like a motion to close the public meeting. Wells has moved. Councillor Heidt has seconded that we now close the public meeting. Those in favor? This public meeting is closed. I have a recommendation in front of me. Councillor Heidt, what's your wishes?
Move the recommendation.
Recommendation is outlined in the report on the first page, and that is for approval. Do I have a seconder? Okay, so we do not have a motion at this time. Councillor Black.
Well, I would move the recommendation and add further that this application be placed under site plan control, and I think you used the words and site plan drawings. Is that what you said? Site plan control and the requirement of a site plan drawing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and receive site plan approval.
Okay, so those are the words that I want placed in that motion. If the greenhouses will be used for any legal marijuana production.
Do you want to give that to me again?
Okay, it says further that this application be placed under site plan control and the words that Matt gave us. If the greenhouses will be used for, and I use any legal, I got from Councillor Oliver, marijuana production. Well, I don't see the harm in that. Because if it's illegal, it's...
Matt, yes.
Just a point of clarification with the county clerk. Would we need direction from council to come back with a site plan control bylaw for this property?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there is delegated authority for site plan, I believe, to Mr. Baird. So Mr. Baird has the ability to sign off to that on that himself if it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Are you working on this or am I? Are you working on it or am I?
Oh, on the wording?
On the wording, yeah.
I've got it here.
Yes, I do. What I'm going to do, Councillor Black, is have the clerk read the proposed resolution, and then I'll look for a mover and seconder just to make sure the wording is your approval as the mover to the wording. If you would go ahead, please. Thank you.
That the application by Nightingale Farms Ltd, 1492 Wyndham Road 19, Lafayette, Ontario, NOE 1HO, affecting lands described as part lots 21 and 22, concession 9, geographic township of Wyndham, Norfolk County, to amend the Norfolk County zoning bylaw 1Z 2014, file number ZNP 2017-131, to provide relief of the following deficiencies created through a farm split, 36.80 hectares from the minimum required lot area of 40 hectares to be permit an area of 3.20 hectares, 1.04 meters from minimum front yard setback of 13 meters to permit a setback of 11.96 meters, 1.78 meters from the required exterior side yard setback of 13 meters to permit a setback of 11.2 meters be approved for the reasons set out in the report number DCS 17/72, and that the public input was received for this application and therefore was considered as part of the recommendation, and further that this application be placed under the requirement of site plan and site plan approval for the greenhouses if the greenhouses will be used for legal marijuana production.
Legal. Thank you. You okay with that? Do I have a seconder? Wells? Discussion. Counselor Black, then Counselor Oliver.
Well, we all know, somebody said it already, we're struggling with this. We're operating in the dark. We don't know, the federal government has done this to us. It's another download, and here we are having to deal with this. And if we don't, we're going to have some big problems down the road. So I think at the very least, I think it is a responsible thing for us to do, to consider this, and really, I guess, show some proactivity and support for staff to come forward with more information on this, how we can deal with it more properly and for future applications, so we don't have to go through, groping around and not knowing exactly what to do. So I think it is the right thing to do, and that's why I've moved the motion. Thank you.
Counselor Oliver?
Mr. Mayor, this may be the right thing to do, but I don't think we know yet. And I am going to move a deferral of this application, of this motion rather, for a period of up to 3 months. And the reason why I make that motion, if you'll allow me to speak to it, or do I need a seconder before I can speak to it?
Deferral, I will need a seconder, and then certainly we can speak to it. It's proposed to defer this for 3 months, up to 3 months. Do I have a seconder for that suggestion? Councillor Geisens has seconded. Motion for deferral takes precedent, so I will entertain any discussion on deferral only at this point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I appreciate where the property owners are coming from. I think we all do. They're in a difficult situation. They've told us their intentions, and we believe their intentions, but one never knows what's going to happen. I think until we get this report back from our staff that gives us a couple of options for the long term, ones that may or may not be any better than the idea of site plan control, I think it's just premature to make any kind of a decision on this one. It will tend to set a precedent, and it does affect some immediate neighbors, which we've been told it would. And I think the right thing to do is to give ourselves, all of us, the property owners, staff, us as council, some breathing space for at least this period of time. Hopefully we'll have these recommendations back. So that's my reason for recommending deferral. Thank you.
Councillor Height, then Black.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Would I be permitted to ask a question to staff?
Absolutely. If it's on the deferral, go ahead.
It is, I'm wondering, the powers of the OMB, is this appealable under the OMB?
That's a good question. Under the deferral, yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we go past the allotted time for the deferral, then yes, then this it would be open to appeal.
And to further that, Councillor Height, yes, the decision tonight is appealable. I think that's what you were asking.
It is, so then county would be in the position that we have to defend this deferral plus all of these restrictions, and really what we need is an odor control bylaw. All right, thank you.
Councillor Black, deferral?
Yes, well, I was thinking of deferral myself, and I was trying to do a compromise with the other one, but I've got to agree with the deferral, because let us see if we can get some more information, and then this motion will come back, and maybe it'll change the motion, maybe it won't. So I'll agree with the deferral.
Anyone else on the deferral? Oliver has moved. Geisens has seconded that we defer this for a period of 3 months. No further discussion. Those in favor? 5. Those opposed? That is carried. It is deferred up to 3 months. Yes.
Or if it would be in order if we could also provide direction to staff, because the task force now seems to have taken on a larger potential terms of reference than the immediate problem of how to deal with the small grow-ops that are popping up. Could we provide direction to staff to fast track their recommendations and options vis-a-vis this specific problem? Nothing to do with retail, nothing to do with the other points that Matt and Pam mentioned. This is priority one. We now have a 3-month time limit in which to figure out whether we're doing the right thing or not. I don't know whether you could do that.
I'm looking here, since we're in the middle of, well, public meeting's closed till we get to the next one. Your thoughts?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Yeah, it's difficult to say whether or not we should be considering additional staff reports. I mean, usually you would include
Later,
the,
thank you.
usually you'd include the direction within the deferral itself.
Just before we move on to the next one, and a comment that I have on this is, we had a 20-page report. We saw the word marijuana, at least I did when I read it once in this report. Severance has taken place. It can't go through legally until the three deficiencies, backyard, side yard, and lot size, are addressed. That's really what the application is about. The word marijuana shows up once, and so we are, myself including it, the caution lights go on. I just want to point that out because this is the severeness that we are dealing with this odor of marijuana throughout our county. And if there was no intent, in my opinion, whatsoever, to grow marijuana in these greenhouses, this, to me, would be an absolute straightforward application. I can't think of any reason otherwise to deny it. Councillor Wells, just a personal comment from me.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, may I ask Mr. Bond a question before we move on?
You certainly
The
can.
comment that he made
Yes.
prior to. And the comment that he made is, he suggested that other municipalities in Ontario are not having this problem with marijuana. Are they doing something different that they are not having these problems? Why is it that we are so richly blessed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a very good question. I personally have a feeling it has to do with both our former severance policies. We do have a lot of residential 1-acre lots near operations, greenhouse operations included, and it also probably has a lot to do with the diversification of tobacco in Norfolk County. And we have greenhouses that are quite large, and people are looking for different uses for them. And some of our rural municipalities that surround us do not have those challenges.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the next application. Let's go to page 95, Council. This is an application under staff report DCS 17-62. This application has been received to amend the Norfolk official plan for lands within a secondary planning area for the North Dover Mills in Port Dover. The proposed amendment will allow the developer to proceed with the draft plan to subdivision for the first phase of the secondary plan for the planning area. The proposal also includes blocks for farmland and stormwater management. George Egg and agent Douglas Valley Limited has put forth the application which affects the lands described as 81 Dover Mills Road in Port Dover. I will now open this public meeting on staff report 17-62. Shannon, are you going to do this? No? So I don't see Kayla. Matt, I guess I'm going to, oh no, Matt's not going to. My goodness, Pam, by default, you're in charge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to provide this report on behalf of my colleague Kayla DeLay, who is currently on her honeymoon. So the original application was brought forward to council in August, and the public meeting raised some questions both about road patterns and security, about servicing, road patterns and servicing. And some of those concerns are outlined in the report through Appendix A to J. Norfolk County deferred the application to provide time for the applicant, agent, and staff to have further discussions. So just to remind you, the property is designated urban residential and it's zoned development. The entire North Dover Mills neighborhood plan area consists of about 110 acres, and the subject lands are currently 38 acres. And the following are a few photographs of what the property looks like today, and it is being cropped. So very quickly, the applicant is now willing to provide a connecting link to the west, which will facilitate a future link to the Tisdale Road as shown here on the slide. Furthermore, the developer agent has also worked with Public Works staff to create a terms of reference, and that's located on actually Appendix K of the report. And Appendix K outlines further requirements for the next planning applications, and that would be the zoning application and both the draft plan approval application. And this will ensure that the entire North Dover Mills area infrastructure is developed logically and sustainable, and it will not preclude future development to take place, and it will ensure infrastructure is sized appropriately. As always, our General Manager of Public Works, Lee Robinson, is here to assist with questions in this regard. And overall, Appendix K allows the developer and the county to move forward with the draft plan approval and the zoning applications, and therefore staff are recommending approval of the official plan amendment. It should also be noted, and I believe you have on your desks tonight, Council, in addition to the appendices of the report, there is an email from Mr. Brian Ogden, who supports the road pattern and the servicing, and I believe wants to be involved in the future.
There it is. Thank you very much. Thanks, Pam Dusling, for giving the report. Questions to planning? Black and Columbus, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Can you put the map back up? Was that included in our package, that particular one there? I don't know if I saw that. Was that in there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is. It's in map 6 of the report.
Okay. So this, like on a previous one, there wasn't the ability to connect that road up to Tisdale because it was going on to somebody else's property. So this whole secondary plan, the whole idea of it is to put different owners together so you can develop a whole comprehensive plan over multiple ownership properties. So is that what I'm seeing now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, and maybe Ms. Robinson can provide the further details on the traffic in particular.
Okay.
Ms. Robinson?
Through the mayor to council, what you see before you is this application is different than most of the applications that our council has typically seen historically in front of us. Typically, a secondary plan is already done or it's not required, and so they're able to go right to the draft plan of subdivision approval phase. In this particular case, there is one particular developer who is desirous of moving forward with his application in a timely manner. The other property owners in the area are not desirous or have not indicated a desire to move forward with developing their properties at the same speed as this particular developer is. As such, they came forward with requests to allow different things to allow this particular development to go forward for this particular developer. So staff have sat down and we have worked with it. So the report before you tonight is an official plan amendment to allow them to proceed with doing these limited terms of reference that they have agreed to undertake, which will satisfy staff's concerns with respect to that. The road pattern that you're seeing up there is just a conceptual thing. We're not at that stage of anything at this point. It's one of the multitudes of thoughts that is going forward. So it doesn't represent, council is not approving any road patterns this evening. They're not approving anything. What they're saying is that after the developer satisfies these terms of reference, we'll be in a position to evaluate their draft plan of subdivision application so that they would be able to proceed. That's the stage where the road patterns will come into play, et cetera. This is just allowing them to go forward to that stage. So this is a very conceptual stage at this point.
I do like the idea of the road eventually going to Tisdale, but at the moment, that owner doesn't seem to be on side with the plan, so then the road ends up being a dead end. So anyway, another question through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff. The area in purple, I don't know if that same statement applies to this as well, that it's conceptual and that you might not end up with that medium density portion, the purple portion in that particular location. But I do recall the last meeting, some of the people coming to the podium, the residents in the neighborhood, the neighbors right around it, were a little bit concerned about and asked the question, why does it have to be there? Why can't you move it over? So there, the buffer between the development and them is similar. Single family residential dwellings, and then the medium density would be on the next block over to the east. So wondered if you could address that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Black. Again, a good question, and I'm assuming that the developer and agent have noted those comments from the previous public meeting. Again, this is just a conceptual diagram map at this time. The developer is aware that some form of higher density other than singles will be required on the first phase. Where that is, it remains to be seen, and those details will come forward in the draft plan approval, and it is a public process, so the neighbors can respond to that then.
Councillor Columbus?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And following the August 22nd meeting, Mr. Lawrence, the owner of the property to the west, contacted me. And have you communicated with him about this roadway heading west towards Tisdale? And who would be responsible? Like, the developer of that property would have to pay for provide the road and the services, I take it. That's the way it works, right?
Through the mayor to council. At this point, we can't answer a lot of questions with respect to that. I can, Mr. Lawrence did come and see myself. We had a good conversation with respect to addressing and some of the concerns, et cetera. So those were all noted. They were included, they were under the consideration for the terms of reference that Public Works has no objections to, that are attached to the report before you this evening. It addresses his concerns as well as the Public Works concerns. With respect to who does what, ultimately that's sort of some of the stuff that will be coming out of it. Typically a road of that magnitude through there would actually become part of a future development charges study. And as such, it would actually be effectively an arterial road that Norfolk County would actually construct with the money from development charges. Although the land is acquired through the variety of, there's a variety of methods of obtaining that land. It can be done through the draft plan of subdivision. It can be donated to the municipality. It can be part of a planning application. There's a variety of ways, but until we actually determine some more details, it's hard to say how we would do that and who would pay for it and how it would be constructed. Typically, given the number of properties that it crosses and the complexity of that, typically it's something that Norfolk County would collect development charges for and undertake as part of our capital program.
And with the development of the egging property, it's egging, isn't it? Yeah. With that, they're talking about a traffic study here. If there is too much traffic coming onto Prospect, when would that trigger the need to push that road towards Tisdale?
Through the mayor to council, there's never going to be a case where the connection of that road to Prospect Street is going to be recommended by staff. We will be considering things like an emergency access through it, which means that it wouldn't actually be accessible to traffic. There would be certain things in place that we would be able to allow for emergency access, but we wouldn't have that. There is the potential for it to be a right-in only, which means that you wouldn't have any traffic coming out. That particular area of Prospect Street doesn't have sufficient sight lines to allow really anything other than driveway traffic coming out through that area. As part of this traffic study that the developer will be undertaking, they'll be looking sort of more of a holistic thing. And I would expect that what's going to come out is that connection to Tisdale is going to be required. As part of their traffic studies, what will show up is a trigger for when that connection will actually need to take place. And that'll be included with respect to the development charges for how to schedule it accordingly so that we don't have traffic issues on an interim basis or on a fully developed basis either. It's very important that there's different stages being considered as part of it. We can't just look at it from beginning to end and say this is what we need to do. We need to actually stage it according to the developments. Because, for example, if the other properties don't develop for another 20 years, it's going to be very different traffic patterns that are taking place. So as part of all of this review and as some of the comments that come back from the draft plan of subdivision application when we get to that stage, we'll be ones addressing what the triggers will be to identify when those projects should take place.
Further questions to staff? I'll proceed then. Mr. Valley, you're here as agent for Mr. Egg Inc. I'll ask if there's anyone in attendance wishes to speak in support of this application, and certainly we start with the agent. Mr. Valley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. We were here back in August. Doesn't seem that long ago, but it was in August, and we bounced this around all night. Since that time, there's been a lot of work that's gone on between our office and the developer, Lee Robinson in her office, Pam Dusling and Chris Baird in their office, and I believe that what we've got before you tonight is a very viable solution. We have to keep in mind that we are not here to talk about things like traffic and trees and neighborhood road patterns and all those kinds of things, because all that will be discussed when we come back with a draft plan application. And that's what you've just heard from Lee Robinson as well. There'll be traffic studies done. There'll be all those studies done next time we come see you with an actual draft plan and lot layouts, and we'll know where we want to put the townhouses and so on. So I remind council that we're not here about those sort of details of the future development. All we're asking for is an amendment to a secondary plan so that we can then move forward and do the study on servicing that Lee Robinson has asked us to do, which is in Appendix, I believe, K, and so that we can go forward and do the traffic studies and come up with a road pattern and so on. So I'll ask council to keep the focus on what's before you tonight, which is simply this secondary plan, not the draft plan, which we'll bring forward to you hopefully in a few months. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have, and I'll leave it at that.
Council, any questions for Mr. Valley? Thank you, Mr. Valley. Is there anyone else in attendance who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Yes, sir, if you'd give us your name and just hit the talk button. Thank you.
My name is Brian Ogden. I live at 14 Hickory Court in Port Dover and attended the last meeting, and like a lot of people voiced some reservation about how the broader services were being handled. I'm glad to see that there's a servicing study proposed that will look at all the services, water, including traffic. I'm glad to see that there's been discussion on long-term protection for a corridor over to Teesdale. However, I understand the piece between Egg Inc. development and Teesdale is not presently in the urban envelope, so I'm not quite sure how the road would be constructed in that piece, and whether that means very long-term or not. And I'm sure the Director of Public Works or Community Planning might be able to provide some insight there. I'm concerned about the safety of Prospect between Dover Mills and Tisdale. That piece has some major sightline issues which have been noted. Curves, horizontal, vertical curves, half rural on one side, half urban on the other. Vegetation almost right up to the edge of the right-of-way. It's challenging. It's positive to see that there's been some suggestions, and the Director of Public Works fairly clear on the challenges of and how negative it would be to have an access from Prospect into the development. I don't know if it's possible as part of this work or an ongoing process just to look at some short-term operational improvements on that chunk of Prospect. I know there's the Dover Mills and Prospect come together at a horrible skew there, and you have to be Superman with X-ray vision to have clear sight lines down there because of some very large trees. And on the lakeside, the vegetation comes right down, the grade comes right down to the edge of Prospect, and a lot of old trees and utility along there. I'm not sure if it's possible to do some remedial work along there that would help improve those sight lines. I think it would go a long way to make that a much safer connection, because I know in the year I've lived down here, once I've been run off the road biking along there, and just a month ago, right where the connection is proposed, the local newspaper delivery person, I guess, thought maybe they were in England, so they're on the wrong side of the road, right on that blind curve. Of course, I saw them swerved around them into the oncoming traffic, and in the Norfolk tradition, they waved at me and I waved back, and they probably couldn't read my lips. And my wife wasn't in the vehicle, so I got a forgiveness there. But it's a challenging, piece of road. I'm amazed that there haven't been more accidents. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know, Lee, if you wish to respond to, Brian had two questions. One was on road construction, and the other one is possibility of short-term sightline improvements, et cetera.
Through the mayor to council, with respect to how we can build a road, there's multiple processes that exist in the province of Ontario that allow us to do that. Fortunately, roads are not required to be located only within urban settlement boundaries, so the fact that a portion of that road would be outside of the urban settlement boundary, fortunately, is not a problem at all. That's most certainly allowed to take place. There are a variety of different ways. One of the ways a road can be developed is obviously through a planning application. And so different planning applications can propose roads. Another way to do it is through a class environmental assessment, which is outside of the planning process. You can actually do a class environmental assessment and run it concurrently with a draft plan of subdivision application as well. There's mechanisms in place for that. So there's multiple ways of addressing that. It's hard to say what staff will be recommending because we haven't seen the results of the studies yet to give us an idea of when the trigger points are going to be met, et cetera. So once the draft plan of application comes back before us, we'll be actually able to provide much more definite information. But staff are satisfied that there are definite means of ensuring that that road is constructed at the time that we need it to be constructed outside of the requirement for a planning application. And with respect to
Road improvements on Prospect?
small localized improvements, we can certainly have somebody look at the area and see what we can do in terms of some minor improvements on an interim basis.
Thank you. Anyone else in attendance wishes to speak in support of this application? Chris? Chris Van Pass. We know who you are.
I've lived in and around Dover for a long time. Used to go down there and once in a while and watch a young fellow play hockey for the Sailors and Lakers. Used to be pretty good, and I could buy a pop and a bag of chips for $0.25. So I've been watching Dover grow a little bit over the years. This, again, is just the next step. And I think everybody can agree that, Mr. Valley said it, this is the big picture. The plan of subdivision is the important stuff that comes next. But I ask council to sort of take the initiative and get ahead of the curve for once. You know that sooner or later the road needs to come out to Tisdale. Why not take the initiative and start that process so when Mr. Valley has to draw up his plan of subdivision with the actual locations of the roads, he knows that council accepts the fact that a road will have to go out to Tisdale Road. Have council take the initiative, staff take the initiative, enter into negotiations with the property owner to the west and get the road built. Because the last time I was at the last meeting and Councillor Brunton sort of said something that made so much sense to me. Why not have council just go build the road and, you leave that on the bill, and when that next piece of property gets developed, you get your money back. So all you're doing is fronting the money, doing it right. And, I think of all the people living in those nice subdivisions. Do they want to see all the cement trucks, all the material being delivered, all the work being done? Or we just give a new access to the backside of the subdivision and get it in that way and make everybody's life a little bit better till it gets all done. So I just ask council maybe to keep that in the back of your mind and maybe have staff start working on it in conjunction with Mr. Valley's plan of subdivision. So thank you very much.
Any questions from council? Thank you, Christopher. Anyone else in attendance who wishes to speak in support? Mr. Lawrence?
Mr. Mayor, Council, at the August meeting, I was told that my 3 acres was not viable. So I went to a local engineer surveyor, and I had plans drawn up, okay, which I'll... I'll give you two. As you can see, this was the access we talked about on the August meeting, and Mr. Valley said it didn't seem viable that we could put anything in there. Well, as you see, we have 16 lots there. Now, on these 16 lots, we have a temporary turning circle, which is on my agricultural land, or our agricultural land. We did have a turning circle in the 3 acres, and we still got our 16 lots, but it's a little bit better if we did it this way, we thought. So anyways, but this is the old one we talked about on the last meeting, the access into the 3 acres, which apparently they're not talking about now. So I'd like a council to come up with a way of me utilizing that 3 acres and the 16 lots there, whether it be attached to the stub road or what, you know. There has to be a way to do it. Or the other thing is keep that, I'm sorry. No, the other thing
Bob, finish up, and then I'll open it for questions, yes.
Yes. The other thing is, or keep that stub road open where it was 2 months ago. And do the one to the north, too. The one to the north is really the right thing to do, but we have to somehow get to it. That's my thing.
Okay, there's questions. Councillor Brunt and then Black.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Just first of all, Bob, is this the portion that's in the urban boundary?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm just trying to relate it to the little diagrams we have in our agenda here. But right now, what they're saying, you say you've been told that it's not viable? What's not viable? Just to put a road in there?
Mr. Valley said that at the last meeting, he didn't think that was a viable piece of land. I'm just proving that I think it is a viable piece of land, and I'm sure anybody here that owned that would think it's a viable piece of land.
Okay, I don't know. I mean, just looking at this, I guess it shows potential, but I'm wondering, I don't know, and I guess Mr. Valley would be best to answer the questions, but I don't know how it's serviced, like, does it require some oversizing downstream? Like, where does your sanitary go? Where's the storm go? I don't know, like, those are questions
That's really nothing to need right now, because we're just trying to get the thing in.
You just want a stub left there, is that what you're saying?
I'd like it, yes, and then we'll go from there.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Black.
Thanks, but Councilor Brunton asked my question. That's in the urban area.
Yes. Anything further for Mr. Lawrence? Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Anyone else in attendance who wishes to speak in support? Hearing none, is there anyone in attendance who wishes to speak in opposition or in general to this application? Come forward, please, and give us your name. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Heather Easton. I was here at the last meeting as well in August. So a question, I think more in general, a couple questions. So the roadways still are conceptual. I think that's been emphasized today. But you've said now the entrance that was coming right alongside one of the neighbors' homes right out to Prospect is now off the table. That was conceptual, but that's now off the table. And now it's straight to Tisdale, is conceptual still, and that's the one that's on the table. So I want to just be clear about the one to Prospect.
You want to be clear that the roadway that was to exit onto Prospect has been removed?
Yeah, so that's now not part of the plans, it's now to Tisdale.
Lee, will you respond, please?
Through the mayor to council and to the delegation, with respect to that, I'm struggling a little bit to give you a very definitive answer because I can't give you a definitive answer until council approves a draft plan of subdivision.
Okay.
Because that's when the official pattern gets decided, and that's outside of my control. That's up for a decision for council to make. That being said, I can tell you that from an engineering perspective, as a licensed professional engineer, there is no way that a connection with full intersection movements to Prospect is possible. The existing Prospect cannot handle a connection for that size development in that location. It could handle 2 or 3 cars, like a driveway, but it most certainly cannot handle a full connection.
Okay.
So I know that's not exactly a guaranteed answer, but until there's a draft plan in front of you, I can't promise exactly where everything is going to be. What we may see, again, as I'd indicated previously, what we may see is that there may be an emergency entrance through that area. So it may look like a walking path that emergency vehicles could drive down should there be something that occurs in that area and they need to get in there. That's something that's potential, that could potentially go in there. We don't know because we're not at that stage yet, but I know for a fact that staff cannot support a full-blown intersection for that development in that location. There are not sufficient sightlines.
Thank you. And I get that it's conceptual, and I guess I get that Mr. Valley wants to try to keep us focused. We were talking about everything last time because there was a lot to talk about, I know.
Sure is.
For the builder, they only have a few things, and those other things are not the same concerns that us that live there have. But still, like I said, you know, it shows the road going out to Cockshut. Somebody else brought up the, like, why not just do the roadway now to Tisdale? I'm not sure, but to me, yeah, for the traffic flow at Dover Mills and Prospect and at the corner of Tisdale Lane, yeah, it seems like whatever, for the construction phase 2, the traffic has to be not all in our neighborhood for the next 10 years with everyone rolling down with the trucks. So, I mean, I would want to see, I said, whatever for the next phase is, the traffic going elsewhere. I just wanted to point out, too, that, and I mean, I guess the point was already made today. My kids just go to St. Cecilia's School, and we actually are too close to qualify to take the school bus, but we do take the school bus because the area is called hazardous conditions for walking. So maybe that point's already been made here tonight by Ms. Robinson, but that's something that I didn't think of last time, that I thought that's just important to note too. And even while construction stuff is going on, there's still, in my world of children in the area and not just retirees moving to town, which I know there's a lot of as well. There's 2 sets of kids almost every 2 houses, the whole way up Dover Mills and the whole way down. So that's a more main concern is what the traffic flow is, and I know that there's studies that will be coming, but that's still a concern for the area for me. So that's it. Thank you.
Anything else? No? Any questions? We thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition or in general to this application? No, this is public. And if there isn't, then I'll entertain you. Just give me a second. Okay, I hear none. Councillor Brunton, thank you for your patience.
Just wondered, Your Worship, if I may ask Mr. Valley a few more questions?
Yeah, well, I'm just coming to that part.
Okay.
So stay on your feet.
All right.
And since there's no one else speaking in opposition, the next question is, anything further from council? Councillor Brunton. And Mr. Valley, I think you might as well head up to the podium if you would, please. And Councillor Wells, you will be next. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I guess my question, you've heard Mr. Lawrence speak about this portion of land here. Have you did some preliminary work, like, this isn't the urban boundary, I'm just wondering, have you had any detailed discussions with him at all?
We have not had any discussions with him. I know he's met with Lee Robinson about that. It's great that he's provided us with that sketch. That shows us what the limits of his property are. We tried to determine that in advance of the August meeting. We took boundaries off of, I believe, your GIS system, which were a little different than that, but nonetheless. it is a challenge that he has part of, the majority of his land is outside the urban boundary, a
Right.
small part's in. Put the turning circle inside there, it makes it really a challenge. And we, of course, had the concerns last time about building a stub road to him to service his land and all that cost going to egging. And we talked about those numbers the last time we were here. But again, this is a topic that we are no doubt going to have discussion about when we bring back our draft plan, subdivision, to you. And that will obviously be where we nail down that road pattern and whether there's a stub there or whether there isn't.
I realize that, but the question I have is, I don't know, I'm not that familiar with the lay of the land down there, but that type of application, like which way, I know you said your stormwater is going north to a pond.
That's correct.
Your sanitary, you said, was capacity to go south?
Yeah, the sanitary vision, part of the study that we're going to do, that's terms of reference attached, looks at 2 different options for that. I anticipate the one that we originally proposed is what will survive, is taking the sanitary down through the existing Silver Lake subdivision and down to the Ryerson Street pumping station.
Okay. All right, and I just wondered, that portion of land there may go that way too, gravity-wise, or no?
Well, if that will be part of the servicing study that we do as in Appendix K. We'll determine that.
Okay, and as far as the traffic study, I guess you'll be into that, or you've got plans for that?
We will be retaining a traffic consultant so that we can go ahead with the draft plan, yeah.
Okay, and, you know, I'm not sure, you heard Mr. Robinson say that Prospect isn't an outlet, but I'm just wondering, here we go again, and, you know, it's not just this development, but front-ending agreements, like to go out through the agricultural land to Tisdale, that's a big expense, I would think, that length of road. And I'm wondering, could it go the other way through what we call the secondary plan area and come down to, what's that other road, Dover Mills? Is that something you would look at as an alternative?
If you're going to build a road on somebody else's land, no doubt you're going to need permission from that landowner, but again,
I realize that.
Yeah.
But if you only have one outlet right now, if they restrict, well, I guess we'll wait till the traffic study comes in. Is that fair?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wells.
Question was not to Mr. Valley. Is it already
Okay, he can
comment?
stay there for a moment if he doesn't mind.
First of all, I want to thank Mr. Lawrence for bringing in this diagram. I think that's very useful. Secondly, I want to thank Mr. Van Passen for coming and suggesting that maybe we should look at things now as opposed to waiting until something has happened. And thirdly, I was pleased to hear that we are going to have more discussion with between Mr. Valley, the county, and Mr. Lawrence. I think those are all very positive things.
Thank you, Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. My questions have to go to staff.
Okay, Mr. Valley, I'll have you be seated, and you know the next question will be to you. In the meantime, I won't win at that game, so I'm not going to try. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Public Works. Lee, we need a solution to get a road from Tisdale to Highway 6. How is that possible? We're bolting a bag on the side of a perfectly fine machine right now by what we're doing today, and we need a better solution. Municipalities must make roads, somehow. How?
Through the chairman to council, I'm a little confused as to where you want me to take the road from. I would have thought that we would have been going from Tisdale to the Cockshed. That's okay. I wasn't sure how to get down to Highway 6.
I knew what he meant.
Yeah, County Road 5, which is the Cockshed. Yeah. Okay, so again, if there is no planning application in front of us, the way to do a road is to start a class environmental assessment. And that class environmental assessment, we have to articulate what the problem is. And the problem, I would contend, is that we need to get traffic, we need a east-west route north of the existing developed area in Dover. That would then start the Class CA process. We would go through the entire Class CA process, and at the end of the Class CA process, we would have the approvals required under the Environmental Protection Act. We would then be in a position to start negotiating land acquisition from the property owners in the area, at which point council can then construct the road. All of that being said, a lot of that project can be funded through the development charges. We would end up effectively front-ending it because the need for that road would occur before the full build-out of that entire area, but eventually the county would recover the full costs for the construction of that road that are eligible under the development charges. There will be some that's attributed to the existing, but a lot of it will be attributed to development.
Price tag and timeline?
Timeline?
Through the mayor to council, sorry, I'm looking at the area, trying to figure out a price tag for you and a timeline. If we're looking at a road that we're anticipating is mostly through the actively farmed portions, that will significantly speed up the timeline to do that review because the land there's minimal habitat on existing actively farmed land. The result of that is that we don't have to do a 3-season study as part of the class environmental assessment. So I would say if that's something that council is desirous of implementing, a reasonable expectation for having the project completed would probably be about 8 to 9 months from the time that we were instructed to do that, provided that we're not having to do a bunch of environmental studies associated with it. You're likely in the $100,000 range for that class environmental assessment.
And that would be paid back through development charges?
We are currently starting the development charges background study, so that would be a project that Public Works would recommend be included in the development charges background study. It won't be, in accordance with the legislation, it won't be 100% chargeable to that because it has a benefit to existing, but a portion of it can be, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess through you, Mr. Mayor, to planning. What would this require? An official plan amendment for boundary adjustments, zoning bylaw? How do we move the urban boundary?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So those lands, these lands are currently in the urban boundary right now. They're not part of the secondary plan, though, I should mention. And in terms of moving further into that agricultural piece where the road could go, that's probably something that should be done at the next official plan review. But as Ms. Robinson said, there's ability to build a road in the agricultural area.
So, just so I'm clear, you would suggest waiting 7 years for the next official plan review, because it's 2 years coming in, 5 years again later, and then add it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if it's a municipal act, yes, the property owner otherwise has the ability to come forward and put an official plan amendment through, but they would have to provide the justification that there is need in the urban boundary of Dover to expand the urban boundary, and through our current official plan review, we know that that's not the case right now.
So, I guess that's it, Mr. Mayor, but that sounds to me like the way to go. It fixes the solution. I'm not sure how Mr. Valley feels. I know he spent a lot of time on what he's got to right now, but I feel really strongly that we should probably do this right and build for the future.
I think, just to kind of move things along here now, we've had some pretty good discussion, and the application before us is a secondary plan for the Egg Inc. site, and I'm fully aware of the importance of the extension of Tisdale Road, the extension to Tisdale Road to the west. To staff, dealing with this application tonight doesn't prevent further discussion and developing of a road to the west, et cetera. So that to me would be something that could follow up after this application is dealt with.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, those things that can be taken into consideration during the draft plan approval.
Is there any other questions from council? I will need a mover and seconder to close this public meeting. Height and Geisens have moved and seconded. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Council, what's your wish on this application? There's a recommendation on page 95. Councillor Brunton.
The recommendation in the report.
Seconder, Wells. Brunton has moved, Wells has seconded that the application by George Egging, 81 Old Highway, number 3, Jarvis, Ontario. This affects the lands described as part of Lot 11, Concession 2. This is in the geographic township of Woodhouse, Norfolk County. This is to amend the Norfolk County official plan. The file number is in front of you. It's recommended for approval for reasons as set out in 17-62, subject to the following, and that the secondary plan area be subject to a site-specific policy that includes the requirement to provide a conceptual area servicing report as outlined in Appendix K, Dover Mills Secondary Plan Servicing Study Terms of Reference at the draft plan of subdivision and/or the zoning application stage. For approval, discussion. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Yes, you may.
I heard we're going to get underway with our development charges study, and through you to Mr. Barrett, if I may. I see here a possible potential for a front-ending agreement. And in your study that's going to start shortly, are you going to ask, there are different scenarios of how you do front-ending agreements, developer, county, whatever, and I'm wondering, could you ask for that in that study to have some proposals prepared on how to implement front-ending for us? Because it's not just this development. I've seen other developments that I think we're going to need it, and it's will certainly open up development in other areas, not just in Dover, in Simcoe, possibly Waterford, other areas that I've looked at. So.
Yeah, through the chair, a lot of the development charges are based on the 10-year capital plan. In development like this, we have to anticipate to make sure it's included, but we'll certainly, Ms. Robinson and Mr. Johnson and I will be involved extensively in that development charge review, so we'll take your comments forward and we'll see how we can incorporate those in. Okay.
I know I need a 10-minute break. I know we have one application. I shouldn't say application, it's a staff report. Do you wish to break for 10 minutes now and then get back at it, or do you want to finish the last one? Let's go. I am on page 159, Staff Report 17-82, an amendment to the Norfolk County Official Plan and Norfolk County Zoning Bylaw 1Z 2014. This affects lands within the resort residential areas to increase the maximum permitted height from 7.5 meters to 9.1 meters. I will now open the public meeting on Staff Report DCS 17-82. Shannon Van Dalen is here to give us her report. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to members of council, staff, and the public. As indicated, this is a public meeting regarding a proposed amendment to both the Norfolk County Official Plan and the Norfolk County Zoning Bylaw to recognize an increase in height to the resort residential areas. The original intent of this application, or of this proposal, was to be included within the official plan review. However, given the zoning component that's at play, as well as council's direction earlier this year, the amendment is being considered as a standalone item. Additionally, it is recognized that this area in the resort residential neighborhoods that the height is a very passionate topic, and that reviewing in this platform as a standalone item allows for an opportunity for direct engagement. As shown on the screen, the heights within the former townships was typically 11 meters for 3 of the resort residential areas, with 7.3 meters in Long Point. As part of the considerations of consolidation for the former municipal townships under one document, the height was amended for all residential, resort residential areas to 7.5 meters. Through that,